Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Praishwa Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamo Pagate Dharmajnanadibhisaha Kalau Nashtadrishamesha Puranarko Dhunoditaha. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur begins his commentary on this section by summarizing the contents of the 7th chapter. He says, here we have the appearance of the divine tortoise. Who is the divine tortoise? Kachapa. And Sindhumanta, we have the churning of the ocean. We also have Vishodvama, the ocean emitting poison. And we have Janai Stutya, prayers offered to the Lord. Shivenaiva Vishapanam, and the topic that's given here in the English translation, Lord Shiva saves the universe by drinking poison. Let us hear what Srila Prabhupada says in the chapter summary. The summary of the 7th chapter is as follows. As described in this chapter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing in his incarnation as a tortoise, dove deep into the ocean to carry Mandara mountain on his back. At first, the churning of the ocean produced Kalakuta poison. Everyone feared this poison, but Lord Shiva satisfied them by drinking it, with the understanding that when the nectar was generated from the churning, they would share it equally. The demigods and the demons brought Vasuki to be used as the rope for the churning rod. By the expert arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demons held the snake near the mouth, whereas the demigods held the tail of the great snake. Then, with great endeavor, they began pulling the snake in both directions. Because the churning rod, Mandara mountain, was very heavy and was not held by any support in the water, it sank into the ocean. And in this way, the prowess of both the demons and the demigods was vanquished. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then appeared in the form of a tortoise and supported Mandara mountain on his back. Then the churning resumed with great force. As a result of the churning, a huge amount of poison was produced. The Prajapatis, seeing no one else to save them, approached Lord Shiva and offered him prayers full of truth. Lord Shiva is called Ashutosha because he's very pleased if one is a devotee. Therefore, he easily agreed to drink all the poison generated by the churning. The goddess Durga, Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva, was not at all disturbed when Lord Shiva agreed to drink the poison, for she knew Lord Shiva's prowess. Indeed, she expressed her pleasure at this agreement. Then Lord Shiva gathered the devastating poison, which was everywhere. He took it in his hand and drank it. After he drank the poison, his neck became bluish. A small quantity of poison dropped from his hands to the ground. And it is because of this poison that there are poisonous snakes, scorpions, toxic plants, and other poisonous things in this world. So we have text number 3 in 6 lines written on the board. I will first sing the text number 1 and 2. Shri Shuka uvacha te nagarajam amantriya phalabhagena vasukim pariviya girau tasmin netram abdhim mudanvitaha are phire suraya yatta amritarthe kurudvaha. Also in 6 lines. Shukdev Goswami said, O best of the Kurus, Maharaj Parikshit, the demigods and the demons summoned Vasuki, the king of the serpents, requesting him to come and promising to give him a share of the nectar. They coiled Vasuki around Mandara mountain as a churning rope, and with great pleasure they endeavored to produce nectar by churning the ocean of milk. What does the word netra mean? I caught you. It's a trick question. Here netra means, the Prabhupada translates it as churning rope. We normally don't hear netra as rope. That's what it says. And Sridhar Swami and other commentators, I believe they gloss it in the same way. Text number 2, in 2 lines. Jiva Goswami points out, this is the way the numbering should be. Harihi purastad jagrihe purvam devastato bhavan. The personality of Godhead, Ajita, grasped the front portion of the snake, and then the demigods followed. So now we'll chant text number 3. Please repeat. Tannai chandaitya patayo mahapurusha cheshtatam nagrihnimo vayam puchham aherangama mangalam swadhyaya shruta sampannaha prakhyata janma karmabhi. That arrangement, na aichan, not liking, daityapatayah, the leaders of the demons, Mahapurusha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, cheshtitam, attempt, na, not, grihnima, shall take, Vayam, all of us, the Daityas, Puchham, the tail, Ahehe, of the serpent, Angam, part of the body, Amangalam, inauspicious, inferior, Swadhyaya, with Vedic study, Shruta, and Vedic knowledge, Sampannaha, fully equipped, Prakhyataha, prominent, Janma Karmabhi, by birth and activities. Translation. The leaders of the demons thought it unwise to hold the tail, the inauspicious portion of the snake. Instead, they wanted to hold the front, which had been taken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the demigods, because that portion was auspicious and glorious. Thus, the demons, on the plea that they were all highly advanced students of Vedic knowledge and were all famous for their birth and activities, protested that they wanted to hold the front of the snake. Let's repeat this responsively. The leaders of the demons thought it unwise to hold the tail, the inauspicious portion of the snake. Instead, they wanted to hold the front, which had been taken by the personality of Godhead and the demigods, because that portion was auspicious and glorious. Thus the demons, on the plea that they were all highly advanced students of Vedic knowledge and were all famous for their birth and activities, protested that they wanted to hold the front of the snake. There's a nice purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The demons thought that the front of the snake was auspicious and that catching hold of that portion would be more chivalrous. Moreover, Daityas must always do the opposite of the demigods. That is their nature. We have actually seen this in relation to our Krishna consciousness movement. We are advocating cow protection and encouraging people to drink more milk and eat palatable preparations made of milk. What kind of palatable preparations are made of milk? Barfi. Srila Prabhupada told Tamal Krishna Goswami in 1977, I believe it was, don't open any more temples. This is after touring the Manhattan skyscraper temple that was subsequently sold by one of his disciples, who later fell down. Srila Prabhupada told him, do not open any more temples. From now on, only open restaurants. And he also wanted reading rooms, like in the West we have Christian Science reading rooms. People just walk in, we call them lounges. At least they used to in the 1990s. So people just come and sit there and they can read Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada wanted this. And he said if they learn how to cook and how to eat preparations made with ghee, this is a milk product, this is the point that we're making, then they will lose their bloodthirsty taste. He used that word. So, Prabhupada continues. We are advocating cow protection and encouraging people to drink more milk and eat palatable preparations made of milk. But the demons, just to protest such proposals, are claiming that they are advanced in scientific knowledge, as described here by the words Swadhyaya Shruta Sampannaha. Actually, when Prabhupada wrote this, it was in the Western world, it was very widely believed that if you're not eating meat, then you cannot sustain proper health. Completely blind to the fact that more people in India were fine. In those days, they were also vegetarians than the Americans are the ones who imported cancer here. We heard the other day. 30, 40 years ago, nobody had ever heard of cancer, and now nobody can think of a family that doesn't have at least one member suffering from cancer in it, or one relative, or at least some acquaintance. Anyway, they say that according to their scientific way, They have discovered that milk is dangerous and that beef obtained by killing cows is very nutritious. It's true. Even doctors used to say this. It is laughable now. We're laughing. But actually, even doctors used to say this. Now, of course, the doctors are endorsing what they call the Mediterranean diet, which is basically our diet. They'll never give credit. I was taking care of my mother in her old age until she died. And I took her to one healthy heart seminar because she had a heart condition. And practically everything that they were teaching in that course, this was Kaiser Permanente, America, big healthcare provider. Everything they were teaching in that course is coming from Vedas. It's all yoga techniques and, our Sadachar diet, all things, but they never give credit. So 40 years ago, before the mass distribution of Sri Krishna Sankirtanam and Mahaprasadam and Srila Prabhupada's books, people were so sunk in the mode of ignorance and passion that they actually believed these things. So Prabhupada is hammering on this point, even though it was not politically correct to do so at that time. Milk is dangerous. We still find people who say this, actually, nowadays. Very popular movement. Vegans don't like milk. Milk is dangerous, and beef obtained by killing cows is very nutritious. So, Srila Prabhupada then resumes the point that he's making. This difference of opinion will always continue. Indeed, it has existed since days of yore. Millions of years ago, there was the same competition. Somebody asked me, what is happening nowadays with the Yamuna River, as you know. Even 20 years ago, it was terribly polluted. So it's a tug of war. Sometimes the demons get the upper hand, sometimes the devotees have to push back and get somewhere, but this thing is going on forever. Dvau bhuta sargau loke smin daiva asura eva cha. How do we define them? The two kinds of personalities are always in this world. One is the daiva, the devotees, or the demigods, and the other one is the demons, the asuras. And how do we know the difference? What is the defining principle? Vishnu bhakta smrito daivo asuras tadvipardeya. This is the defining characteristic. If he opposes the devotees or if he opposes the Lord, the demon. Not so popular to say this in public. We have to use a little bit of discretion, but Srila Prabhupada made this very clear, as does this Puranic quote that he gives us very often. In fact, Krishna says the same thing. He acknowledges, almost verbatim, in Bhagavad-Gita, says the same thing. So, nothing is really new in this world, actually. All these atheistic ideals and all these atheistic endeavors and atheistic propaganda and activities, these things reincarnate themselves again and again and again, along with the people who propagate them. So nothing is really new. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada can say here in his purport that swadhyaya shruta sampannaha, which means fully endowed with realization and study, knowledge, education, science. He says it refers to these demoniac rascals. Other acharyas commenting on this verse, I think Viraghavacharya, maybe someone else also, they say that it means they have studied the Dharma Shastra. Raise your hand if you've studied the Dharma Shastra very carefully. I don't see a single hand going up. And nobody even knows these things anymore because the default norm is that you will be a demon. That is the default norm. So much so that even in India, in fact, I'll go so far as to say, especially in India, if you try to assert your devotional perspective, you will be severely chastised indirectly, especially in the workplace. At your discretion, you can try it to check this out, but I don't suggest that. Anyway, so this demons and devotees, they're always there. And Srila Prabhupada continues his purport now. Millions of years ago, there was the same competition. The demons, as a result of their so-called Vedic study, preferred to hold the side of the snake near the mouth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead thought it wise to catch hold of the dangerous part of the snake and allow the demons to hold the tail, which was not dangerous. But because of a competitive desire, the demons thought it wise to hold the snake near the mouth. If the demigods were going to drink poison, the demons would resolve, why should we not share the poison and die gloriously by drinking it? See how envy works? It's kind of like in the modern world, we have, for example, equal rights. So foolish men, in order to sustain somebody else's economy, they will volunteer or they will be forced, one way or the other, to go and be conscripted into combat duty. And in the name of equal rights, but actually because of envy, another class will come forward and say, well, why can't we go into combat as well? And then they can go to combat as well. We should not be discriminated against. We can do everything they can do. This is the idea. So, this is demoniac mentality. Competitive desire, Srila Prabhupada puts it here. Now, it's interesting because Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, the word here is amangalam. Aher angam amangalam, the part of the snake that is amangalam. What does amangalam mean? Inauspicious. Viragavacharya glosses it as nikrishtam. Inferior, low, base, vile even. This is the bad part of the snake. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur glosses it instead as tivram. The mukham is tivram. So tivram, what does that mean? It can mean of several things, quite a few things. Among them it can be sharp, the teeth are in the front. You have to watch out for a snake's teeth. So, anyway, somehow or other, the demons thought that the Lord was getting some sort of advantage, and they didn't want that to happen because a demon by nature opposes the Lord. Whatever the Lord does, the demon will do the opposite thing. Or whatever the Lord's representatives do, the demon must do the opposite thing, even if they demand the same right. So, he says, actually, that this was the Lord's expert arrangement. Srila Prabhupada seems to be equivocal on this, because here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada suggests at least that the Lord was doing the demons a favor by removing the dangerous part of the snake. In his chapter summary, it's written here that by his expert arrangement, the demons, they lost this opportunity. Anyway, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments here that the Lord deliberately took the head of the snake in order to incite the envy that he knew was in the demons' hearts. Because then the demons themselves would demand to take the mouth of the snake, and later on we'll see in this chapter that the demons also get blasted as a result of having done that. Because what comes out of the snake's mouth? Poison comes out, but before that, fire. And they were burnt by their own choice. In this way, Krishna is very expert. He can arrange it like this. So this is what happened. All right, let's finish the purport. In regards to the words swadhyaya shruta sampannaha prakhyata janma karmabhihi, another question may be raised. In Sanskrit commentaries, when we find this sort of hypothetical or rhetorical question, person is called a purva pakshi, somebody who's We call it the devil's advocate in English. So Srila Prabhupada is raising such a purvapaksha. So he says, if one is actually educated in Vedic knowledge and is famous for performing prescribed activities and has been born in a great aristocratic family, why should he be called a demon? Right? Because the Vedas and all the activities that they prescribe, including even karma kanda activities, karmi activities, real karmi, not the so-called karmi. We call them karmis, but actually they're vikarmis. These things are also the Lord's desire, dharma. If a person is very dharmic, then why should he be called a demon? This is the question Srila Prabhupada is raising here. The answer is that one may be highly educated and may have been born in an aristocratic family, but if he is godless, if he does not listen to the instructions of God, then he is a demon. Asuras tad viparyaya. This is the idea. There are many examples in history of men like Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and Kamsa, who were well educated, who were born in aristocratic families, and who were very powerful and chivalrous in fighting, but who, because of deriding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were called Rakshasas, or demons. Rakshasim asurim chaiva. This Krishna also says in Bhagavad-Gita. One may be very well educated, but if he has no sense of Krishna consciousness, no obedience to the Supreme Lord, he is a demon. That is described by the Lord himself in Bhagavad-Gita chapter 7, text 15. Who knows the verse? Namam dushkritino murha prapadyante naradhamaha mayaya pahrita jnanaha asuram bhavam ashritaha. Because they've taken shelter, the word is used, ashrita, of asuram bhavam, the mood of a demon. Therefore, they're considered to be non-devotees. 4 classes of non-devotees. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Asuram bhavam refers to not accepting the existence of God or the transcendental instructions of the personality of Godhead. This is an interesting point. We can just dilate on this sentence for a moment. Srila Prabhupada mentions that we don't accept the existence of God, or even if we do accept the existence of God, we don't accept his transcendental instructions. Because what other kinds of instructions does the Lord give? Does he give mundane instructions? Yes, he does. He is giving these Vedic literatures, but this is mundane. And the person who is attached to these things and will not accept that the Lord exists or will not follow the Lord's direct instructions, that person has to be considered a demon. Even many great karmis. Bhagavad-Gita clearly consists of transcendental instructions. He's using the same term again. Imparted directly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But asuras, instead of accepting these instructions directly, make commentaries according to their own whimsical ways and mislead everyone without profit, even for themselves. One should therefore be very careful of demoniac, godless persons. Who does that mean? In the practical, who are the demoniac, godless persons that we have to be careful of? Huh? Practically everyone. Practically speaking, everyone. As we mentioned already in the beginning, nowadays the default norm is that you have to be a pakka demon. Otherwise, you're not socially acceptable. It's true. Yanisha sarva bhutanam ityadi. What the devotee considers to be nighttime, the demon considers to be the daytime. Even literally, this is true. So we see in hellish places like Mumbai and Bangalore especially, Delhi, they're up all night long doing all kinds of abominable things, and then they sleep through all 3 sandhyas. You have to wake up before the sandhya. This is the godly life. Sandhya means dawn. This is an interesting point. We'll get to it in a moment. Okay. According to the words of Lord Krishna, even if a godless demon is very well educated, he must be considered a mudha, narathama, and mayayapahrita jnana. Respectively, those terms mean he's an ass, works like an ass. Actually, somebody sent me a very interesting article. In South Korea, where people are famous for working very, 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 very hard, there is a class of what the Japanese call salarymen, hard workers, corporate sellouts, and they burn themselves out with work so much that now it's a new trend in South Korea. The prison system charges people for allowing them to come and stay in the prison for some time out. Club fed. And people actually welcome this opportunity because their lives are so pungent. The Far East in particular excels in this fine art, I have to say. And therefore the Far East has also given rise to these nihilistic ideologies like Buddhism, which is essentially meant for people who are just burnt out with the pungent nature of hardcore, passionate life in the modern world. So, irony of ironies. People are clamoring to get into prison just to get some relief from the real prison, which is outside. So, mudha, hard worker, like this. Narathama, he may be, as this is the main point that Prabhupada is emphasizing here. He may be very refined, very sophisticated, intelligent, very expert, very capable, powerful, so many things. But he is actually very base. And maya yapahrita jnana, even if a person is very learned, even in Vedic knowledge, and nowadays we don't even get Vedic knowledge. Here the words swadhyaya shruta sampanna means real education, authoritative education according to the Vedas. But nowadays what passes as education is not even that. It is pseudo-scientific, pernicious, so-called knowledge that isn't actually so. Okay, so this is the point. The demons, back to the context here, they didn't want to accept they were proud. This is the point. Lord Vishnu knew that they were proud, and on the basis of that pride, he was playing them against themselves for the benefit of the devas. Much as he did with Mohini Murti. Later on, we'll see that. He's cheating them. They don't realize because their ego blocks their intelligence. So this is the great danger we also have to watch out for our own egos, because remember, even the devas, even those who are following the Vedic literatures, but with a non-devotional mentality, this is the danger. Okay, so they didn't want to hold the tail. They considered it to be inauspicious. The Lord cheated them. He took the tail. Or according to Srila Prabhupada's purport, it indicates very strongly that the Lord was doing them a favor. Either way. The plot thickens. Now, enter Vasuki. Now center stage is being taken by Vasuki. Vasuki. Who is Vasuki? What is he called here in this verse? Oh, it's not in this verse. It's in the previous text, text number 1. Nagaraja. Sometimes he's called Naganatha, Nagendra, Nagaraja. He is the Lord of Patala Loka, which is also called Nagaloka. We can read in the 5th canto, chapter 24, at the end of that chapter, it's described. All the snakes, they live Patala, underground. And it's very dark underground, but they have jewels in their hoods, and they have many hoods also. Some of them have, like Brahma, you have different levels of Brahma existence. Some 4-headed Brahmas, some 16-headed Brahmas, 32, 64, ityadi. So similarly, you have different Nagas with different numbers of hoods, but they all have jewels in them. And they live in fabulous wealth, Bilaswarga, subterranean, heavenly existence. Fabulous opportunities for sense gratification. They have golden buildings that they live in, jewel-encrusted gates around their cities, well-fortified, highly protected from intruders. But generally they're very demoniac, and Srila Prabhupada writes therein in the 5th canto, they're always angry. Nagas. Where do these creatures come from? We have to go back to the 6th canto, chapter 6, especially texts 21 and 22. Kashyapa. Who was Kashyapa? Huh? Yes, one of the grandsons of Brahma, no? Yes. So he was married to several wives. He had quite a few wives, actually, but 2 of them are significant for our purposes. Vinata, who's also known as Suparna, and also Kadru. Vinata is the mother of whom? Vainateya. He's called Vainateya because he's born of Vinata. There's a story about this. Both Vinata and Kadru, they very nicely served their husband, Kashyap Muni. And the Muni, being very pleased with them, he offered both of them a boon. Gentlemen, those of you who are married, be careful about this, because we find throughout our Shastras, if you offer an open-ended boon, sometimes it runs into problems. Anyway, so Vinata said, Kadru said, I want 1,000 sons who are all heroic. And Kashyapa said, Tathastu, let it be so. Vinata, she also wanted, but she was, it seems, a little bit more calculating. She said, I only want 2 sons. But those 2 sons have to be more powerful than Kadru's 1,000 sons. They have to be capable of defeating them. So he gave that boon as well. After some time, they both gave birth to eggs. Kadru gave birth to 1,000 eggs. Vinata gave birth to 2 eggs. And they kept those eggs in warm water, incubated them, as it were. We call it not modern scientific language. That's what they did. So after some time, many years, the 1,000 eggs of Kadru hatched. And she gave birth to all these serpents, the whole Naga race. Nagas and Urugas, they're called. Different classes of snakes. Many, many different kinds. And they're the ones who inhabit these lower planetary systems that we read about in the 5th canto. And then after a longer time, Vinata became very impatient. She became worried, what's going on? How come she got her sons, powerful sons? What about my egg? Is it not hatched? Is it going to hatch? What's inside? In a moment of haste, her intelligence was conquered, and she broke open one of the eggs to see what was inside of it. And because she disturbed the gestation, her son came out prematurely. What was his name? Aruna. And Aruna means? We had Aruna about an hour ago. Yeah. The reddish tint, just like we have Arunodaya Kirtan, Udila Aruna Purava Bhage. In the eastern side, when the sun is tinged reddish by the sun which is about to appear, this is called Aruna. Because he came out prematurely, he doesn't shine as brightly as the full sun. You see? So he's called Aruna. And he was angry at his mother, and he cursed her that, you know, this other one is not going to hatch for a while now. You're going to have to wait longer. Eventually, the other egg did hatch, and who was born of that egg? We've already discussed. Vainateya, Garuda. And this is significant to our story because we're hearing about both Garuda and Vasuki, yes. Okay, so there are other stories about Kadru and Vinta. It seems that Kadru was a little bit duplicit because, anyway, we don't need to go into that detail. But Vasuki is the king of the Nagalokas, and Krishna mentions it even in Bhagavad-Gita chapter 10, text number 28 and 9. What does Krishna say about this? Anybody know? Anantaschasmi naganam. But just before that, in previous verse, he says, Sarapanam asmi Vasukihi. Of all the snakes, I am Vasuki. So it would seem funny because what is the difference between a sarpa and a naga? Nagas are the ones under the ground that we've described. They have hoods, and sarpa is any other kind of snake. Sridhar Swami, the same thing is described in 11th canto. There's another quote given there, that Sarpanam asmi Vasukihi and Nagendranam anantoham. Same thing Krishna says to Uddhava. That 11th canto is like expanded version of Bhagavad-Gita, so everything in the Bhagavad-Gita is there. So Sridhar Swami says the difference between these two classes of snakes is that one of them has poison and one does not have poison. Sarpanam savishanam raja vasuki rasmi. This is his gloss. Whereas naganam nirvishanam rajam ananta shesho aham. Ananta Shesha is the king of the non-poisonous snakes, and Vasuki is the king of the poisonous snakes. Remember, we said in Patala Loka they're all very angry, and they're all, it would seem, burning with envy. But these creatures, they're born out of the poison that fell from the mouth of Lord Shiva, and they appeared in this world through the agency of Kadru. Maybe because, anyway, that's what we can say about them. Now, Srila Prabhupada's purport emphasizes two things chiefly. I'm going to finish now. The first point he makes is that there are always these two classes of demons, and in that regard he mentions that the demons are always opposing the Lord and his devotees. He points out also that the demons are always proud of their worldly assets. If you have worldly assets and are proud of that, then you should consider yourself blessed with a demoniac nature. And you need to work on that. And he, by way of analogy or example, Srila Prabhupada wants to mention the milk and the cows, because this is an important cause for the civilization of human society, true civilization. It's not just education, nor even so-called education, pseudo-education, as we've discussed. It's not just these things that make a human being, it is dharma. And it is impossible to have dharma without cows. And it is impossible to become Krishna conscious also without cows. Because Krishna likes cows. His name is Gopala, Govinda, Go Brahmana Hitayacha in the Vishnu Purana. So another thing that Prabhupada mentions in this connection with the two classes of men, that nothing is really new. This always continues, this struggle between the demoniac natures and the divine natures. That's why politics is a waste of time. We were discussing this the other day. Sometimes you find, even devotees, you know, that this is the liberal side. No, this is the conservative side. And they're arguing like this. It's amazing. In the last US election, I saw devotees really really strongly taking sides for one candidate or another, as if it made any difference. Anyway, politics is always a waste of time because these two are constantly fighting, like the modes of material nature. Sometimes one is temporarily supreme, sometimes the other one is temporarily supreme, but it ultimately gets nowhere because its material existence is like that. So nothing is new. Everything has always been around. There's nothing, no ideology is new. Sometimes we find these ancient ideas that are found even in Vedic literature. Prabhupada equates them with modern ideas that we hear in the newspaper. Very often Prabhupada does this. All right, so then the Lord tried to help the Asuras, but they were too ambitious, they were too competitive, and refused his help. This is the point that Prabhupada makes. Envy. Ultimately, the basis of this thing is envy. Okay, so then that brings us to the next point. Demon means even if he is otherwise highly qualified materially, if he opposes God, then he has to be considered a demon. This is where we have to be very careful because we need to know, where do I stand? What are my convictions? What are my activities? What are my desires, my attachments? What is my psychology? Chapter 17 of the Bhagavad-Gita is perhaps the most important of the overlooked sections of Bhagavad-Gita because it deals exactly with the nature of our faith and the origins of our faith. What is it that determines? Samskara is tathatirichyate, Hitopadesh tells us. In the end of a day, a person is always guided by his samskaras. And the glory of Krishna consciousness is that it changes our samskaras. Ordinary mundane dharma will also change our samskaras, but Krishna consciousness is the fast lane. Because Krishna consciousness involves direct appeal to the ultimate authority, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, through chanting his holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're very fortunate to be given this wonderful science by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and we have wonderful instructions throughout all of his books that help us to chant this holy name without offense. That is the purpose of all the instruction. That is the purpose of everything that we do, simply to get us to chant offenselessly. So let us take advantage of this great opportunity and surrender unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as devotees, pure devotees. I'm going to stop here, but if anybody has any questions or any comments, Badri Narayan Maharaj.
Yeah, I have a question. It's a detailed question. I'm just trying to picture in my mind, you're describing the bhakti-yoga and the golden buildings and the jewels, and they're all slithering around. Are they have, human forms, David forms, and then take snake forms according to their choice? They're all slithering around. I'm trying to figure it out.
Let me compound your question. How does a human or semi-human sage like Kashyapa imagine? How does he get a kid who's a snake? This is the question. Yeah. How does his wife give birth to 1,000 eggs?
Well, I didn't want to draw it too sharply. How is 1,000 sons that are all snakes heroic?
Yeah.
Help me out.
We heard yesterday, there are ways to understand these things, but yeah. We have to cultivate awareness of the workings of material nature in order to really understand this, and we don't have that. This is a part of the grand aspect of Krishna consciousness that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls Sambandha Gyan, the nature of all relations between things in this world. That includes the structure of this world, the relationships of living entities to each other within this world, what to speak of with God. None of these things are very clear to us, and this is why we have 9 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam to give us this information. I was thinking when I was looking at this description of Kadru and Vinata and the other wives, of studying the genealogy a little bit, if we actually take these things a little bit seriously, it makes the Bhagavatam easier for us to understand. And it makes the activities of characters within the Bhagavatam also easier to understand. If we study the three modes of material nature, it makes it easier to understand. We have to hear, and we have to hear every single day, and we have to take it seriously. Guru Mukhopadma Bhakya Chitete Koriya Aikya Arana Korihomani Asha. This kind of hearing. This will help us. Because our conceptions are formed by Facebook, by BBC News, by all the things that we hear in society around us, which is essentially a mass consensual illusion, and it's based on envy of God. If we cultivate Krishna consciousness sincerely, if we see the world through the eyes of Shastra, and if we act on the knowledge that we receive from the spiritual master, then all these things become the what shall I say? It becomes common sense to understand how a sage can give birth to snakes. But we have to hear properly. All the knowledge is here, but we're not ingesting it. We're not fully assimilating because we have other priorities. Is that a harsh answer?
Sure, let me meditate.
Anything else? Yeah, Radhanaman Maharaj. I'm sorry? Sorry? Yes. Location. It is at the bottom of the planetary systems. Just Patala Loka is the absolute baseline. Vishnu Shist, you might say. Where Anantashesh actually is holding the whole thing up. Prabhupada often says this. We have so many 14 planetary systems, but the very lowest one is considered to be Patala, and that's held up by Anantashesh. Now the Patala is governed by this Vasuki, who seems to be some sort of, at least he's a vibhuti of the Supreme Lord. But as far as his genealogy goes, he's the son of Kashyap and Kadru. And they're all demoniac living entities, but they have some sort of good karma that they can enjoy nicely. It's described in the Bilasvarga section of the 5th canto. We can review that. Is that okay? Anything else? Yes.
I have a person who is very versed in the Bhagavad-Gita, but at the same time they are not regulated in the eating habits. For example, they take non-vegetarian food and drink. They get up, they pray every day in puja for demigods and every day, but they do it in the night. They get up. During the day they're sitting. So, according to what you were describing, even though this person is very prosperous and very glorious materially, they are to be considered asuras.
Sadachara is missing. Sadachara is missing. One of the items that Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here in his purport is obedience. Obedience. And this is more relevant to the Karma Kanda school, but called Purva Mimamsa. But it's actually also relevant to all of us because you have to follow the instructions. According to Karma Mimamsa, you don't have to understand what the Vedas mean, you just have to follow the instructions. It just doesn't matter what the Vedas mean. As long as you're following their commands, then you'll be situated nicely. And that's true. But there is a higher dimension that we need to awaken if we want pure devotional service. We can't just stay in this material world and keep our noses clean in that way forever. So the point is, vidhi. We're practicing vaidhi bhakti, means bhakti based on injunctions. And injunctions means you have to do this. Just like the spiritual master says, you follow 4 regulative principles, you chant 16 rounds, you follow the sadachar process of Krishna consciousness that he taught, and then you become Krishna conscious. If we do that, then everything is very clear. But if we don't do that, then we don't get anywhere. Krishna says this in chapter 15. Yatanto yoginas chainam pashyantyatman yavastitam, yatanto prakatatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. A person who is following all the vidhis of the Shastras, ordinary, even mundane ones, that person gets realization of Krishna consciousness. But a person who is engaged in sinful activity, Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvanvamoha nirmukta bhajanti mam dridhavartaha. That person, he doesn't get the same realizations. It doesn't work. You have to be pious, but you cannot only be pious. You have to be Krishna conscious as well. This is the point. But the substrate of Krishna consciousness is piety. And that's true in this world, and it's also true in the spiritual world. Is that okay? Person who doesn't follow sadachar is a person who is lost, Krishna says. Purvait purvataram kratam. As your ancients did before you, you do the same thing. And then you'll never fall. Okay? Yes. Raghava.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on this? Being careful of God as a non-made personality. It's just very dividing to sometimes, because sometimes in workplace and other than also we cannot completely avoid interacting with these people.
In chapter 3, text number 31 of Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna addresses this doubt, that even if you cannot follow all the rules and regulations that we're enjoined to follow, and it's assumed that we can't. We know we can't. We experience it daily. You will fail. But he says, because you do not envy these teachings, and because you're trying to follow, therefore it's okay. This is the main distinction between the Vaishnava and the Karma Mimamsaka. Because the Karma Mimamsaka is trying to elevate himself by his adherence. And in Kali Yuga, nobody can adhere to anything. We have enough trouble even chanting our rounds and following the 4 principles. What to speak of anything else? So Krishna addresses this doubt in Arjuna, and he tells him that as long as you do not denounce these teachings or reject them, then you can be carried, but only by his grace. Mat prasadat tarishyasi. What is that verse? Chetasa Sarva Durgani. Mat prasadat tarishyasi. I forget the verse just now, but you will cross over all obstacles by my grace if you listen and follow what I'm telling you to do. Even if you only try to follow, you'll still cross over by divine grace, but only by divine grace. This is the point. Very important point. Okay? All right, we have to stop now. It's too late. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.